So today what I wanted to talk about was two different types of PowerPoints. And one of those is making kind of an automated PowerPoint. And you showed me the one you had been working on before that sort of ran that way. So we can talk a little bit more about that if that's what you're interested in. And the
Yeah,
other,
yeah, you had made some suggestions about maybe, I can't remember now. What was that? Having words come across the screen or something?
yeah, maybe having them move across a little slower with some of those animations and transitions, things like that.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah. And the other type that I was going to talk about today is a data-driven PowerPoint, where PowerPoint and Excel are linked together. And I was going to talk about that first, because
Wow.
once I get that set up, then the rest of the presentation will go right along smoothly. I've got a
Okay.
couple unfinished slides that I was going to show how to work through. And the reason for using Excel in this way is just because it has a lot of functionality in conjunction with PowerPoint. The two, I mean, obviously they're both Microsoft products, and so they're linked together, and that lets you use one inside the other pretty handily.
Nice.
Um, so scrolling down, and just a tidbit, the reason this is about dogs is just, I think maybe we've talked about this. I used to show dogs, and so whenever I have to come up with something off the top of my head, it's usually about showing dogs. um, so here on this slide, what
Which breed, I'm sorry, which breed did you show?
I used to show a little Shetland sheepdog.
Oh, okay,
Yep,
nice.
there is one in this presentation right there.
Nice. I have two of those in my neighborhood now.
Okay, they can be pretty talkative, so hopefully
Yeah.
your neighbors are on the quieter
Well, one
side,
is
maybe?
Jasper, and he just likes to run across the creek up to you. And the other one, he's just too busy playing ball. He doesn't pay attention to anyone out there.
Yeah,
So,
they can be a little neurotic, and I think that's why I love that breed.
oh,
Um, Maybe they make me think of myself.
I had three dogs in my days, and I had the one, the Beagle mix. His mom was a Beagle, and some scoundrel jumped the fence and impregnated her. But it took 5 years to like him. But once he got just a little bit older, he would not leave my side. He was the best dog in the world.
That's awesome.
JD, yeah.
You know, having a good buddy, you can't really beat it.
Oh, he was so cool. He tracked down the kids and he followed them into the movie theater one time
Oh,
and sat there and watched Planet of the Apes with them. You know,
that's amazing. That is
their
great.
nose.
Yep, just gotta follow that popcorn smell. Follow the
Yeah.
kids right in. Yeah. Um, so yeah, when you're working in Excel with PowerPoint, there's a bunch of different ways to put features in, and the way you put something into your PowerPoint really does matter as far as how you eventually then get to use it. So on this particular slide, this is just kind of one with some stuff on there. These are charts. This one I pasted into PowerPoint from Excel as a picture. So what happened is when I went to paste, granted I have nothing on the clipboard right now, I pasted as a picture. And so when I click on it, you can see up at the top, these picture tools appear. Whereas this one, this is a little bit differently. They look almost identical. This one's just a little smaller. But this one's been pasted in as a link. So this is actually a link to my Excel workbook on my computer. Even if Excel was closed, I could double click this and it would open Excel and open that workbook where I made it. And you can see it has drawing tools instead. And if I click on that, it doesn't have a whole lot of options because it wants me to make any changes in Excel instead of in PowerPoint. And then this one down here, this one is even a little different still. This one was pasted into PowerPoint as an embedded file, and so it's linked to the workbook, but it's usable in PowerPoint on its own. So if I were to click on this, you can see instead of picture tools or drawing tools, it says chart tools up here, so it knows that this is a chart. And I could go in here even into design, and change even the data that I'm using for it. I could edit that. I could change even the type of chart if I
And
wanted
was that
to.
from Excel also?
Yeah, these are all from the same Excel
So
workbook.
I always wondered what embedded meant when it said, do you want to,
Yeah, so
you know,
it's it's interesting because the embedding is a isn't a true link. So when I go to select data per se, we'll see what happens. So it's going to mess up my Zoom recording a little. But now it's opening up my data from Excel. It's brought up these windows. Um, and so you can see exactly what it is. I pulled it from this sheet 4. It's a pivot table. And this is the data I'm selecting. So I could reselect the data here. I could get rid of some of it. I don't typically like to work with Excel this way. I find it kind of overwhelming and confusing, but it's definitely handy for folks who are used to that. So I'm going to hit cancel just because I don't want to mess up the template here. But this is one way that you could change what you're working on. And embedding it is probably the most dynamic way. But you do have to refresh your source data anytime that you make changes. It won't make those changes automatically. So, oh no, did I close everything? I didn't. There we go. It's still here.
so then you would open up Excel and click refresh, and then whatever changes you made on the chart in PowerPoint would go into the Excel as well.
Yeah, so let's see. I'll make one of these really different. I'll zoom in a little so we can see a bit better. So let's say we were looking at these bulldogs here. This green represents 2009. And if I were to go to my Excel file, which I'll bring that up, I'll have to go to that. There we go. Here's where these are living on my desktop. Let's say I went to that 2009. Once again, this is a pivot table, so I might have to change this a little differently. Let's go to Bulldogs, and it says, 23,000. I can go in, look at that specifically. That's not quite what I wanted. We'll go here. This is the data that table is linked to. Pivot tables are my preferred way of working with stuff, but it can be a little confusing if you're jumping around in a Zoom meeting. But here, let's go. Here's our 23,000 right here. Let's make that huge. Let's make that 53,000. I'll hit enter. I'll go back to my pivot table and we'll click in here. I guess I'll click in. I made this from, I think, this one. So what I'll do, because so many things up, is go to my Analyze, and I'll hit refresh here. So now I'm just refreshing within my own Excel document. This is just an extra step because of the way I have this set up, and it didn't actually change, which is interesting. Let me try that again. Did I not? I'll save, and then I'll go in. I probably just needed to save it. Sometimes it's a little picky. I'm not sure why that didn't change for me. I'll close that sheet. It's funny, as soon as a question happens that I wasn't expecting, I don't necessarily know
I'm sorry. It's all so confusing.
don't
I'm
worry,
sorry.
you're good. I'll try it from here. I may have pulled that data from this particular, oh, that's right, that's why. My pivot
Ah,
table is based off of this data, not the one over there.
okay.
That's how it went. So now now I'll hit Analyze, refresh, and now we'll see it change to that 53,000 in both cases. And you can see this pivot chart.
On the beagles,
I think I put it in Bulldogs. Yeah, right there.
bulldogs. Oh, there. Okay. I
Here we
kept
go.
looking at the beagles. All right.
And
And then
so,
it moved up there too.
so it moved up in the chart as well. And so now when I go to PowerPoint, I'll switch back over to there. Pew. So now we can see it hasn't really changed yet. So what I can do is I can go to my edit data, and now it's looking at that information we can see in the Bulldogs under 2009. It hasn't changed. And so that's why embedding it isn't quite as useful as putting in a link. I would have to go in and change it here if I wanted to
I
make
just
that
see
edit.
sometimes if I want to share a video or share something, I don't get to it. Just instead, it gives me the option to embed it.
Yeah, in that case, like embedding a video, the way that would work, here, I'll close that out. We'll go back to my
And I
screen.
just didn't understand what it meant by that, but now I'm getting a better idea by seeing the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and that embedding, it allows you to access the data, whether it's data from an Excel file or the video data, but it doesn't allow you to change the original content from within PowerPoint. So I would have to re-import this chart, for instance, but if I were to go to this one that's completely linked, you'll notice the Bulldogs jumped up really
Oh
big
gosh,
because
yeah.
it's that link instead of that embedded element. So that's kind of the difference there. Um, so with that, it gives you a lot of flexibility as far as what you can do. And so what you paste these elements into your PowerPoint as depends on your goal for them. Oops, hit the wrong button. And so in this case, I just kind of put these in just to demonstrate what they look like when they're on your screen. But if you want to add animations to something, I can't really animate this particular item, this link that I've effectively put into PowerPoint. I can make it fade in, I can do kind of the normal stuff to it, but I can't do anything to the actual chart elements inside of it. If I wanted to do that, I'd have to do that trick of embedding it, and you can see I have an animation, over 17 of them for all of these different pieces, so that when I preview what the animation looks like, they all come in one at a time. And PowerPoint makes that really easy if you bring it in as that embedded file. And I can show you how to do that. So go into that Excel. I'll just kind of go through the basics of that. Here's the original source data. And you can see there's these two types of, I have these two tables set up. They're not converted into tables, but they have their headers and they have their data. And they're set up differently because this one is set up to import it as a pivot table with all the different headings. And it just comes out as a different format than this, which is something that I could more easily, for instance, turn into a chart. So if I was interested in just making a chart, I'd probably leave it at that. But if I wanted to mess around with it, here, I'll just show what that would look like. You can put in, and you can see all the different years and those colors for each of the breeds. Maybe that's what I wanted, but I find that a little hard to look at. And so I formatted it so I can make it into a pivot table over here. And that's what I've converted it into here. And I've pulled, just moving the zoom camera around a little, the year, the sum of registries and the breeds into my rows, columns, and values respectively. And that's what's allowed me to make these charts. And I just find this easier because I can switch it around if I wanted to. Maybe instead of doing it by breed, I can do it by group so it can't overlap. The reason for that is because I have two pivot tables next to each other. If I click this and I move it out of the way, then it'll let me mess around with it a little bit. So let's go back. Let's put in set a breed. We'll put in group. And now you can see that what it's done is it's shown the total registries in 2009 by group as opposed to by the breed. And so that's just one of the handy features of using a pivot table that I like. So that's why I have it set up here, but you can do it any way that you want. And within here, you can change all of your formatting too. So if you end up having to import it as a picture or as a link that you won't be able to edit later from inside PowerPoint, this is where you can go into that design tab and change everything about the way it looks. This is something where I'd taken off some of the buttons. If I right click it, it might let me bring them back. It doesn't show that immediately. So let's see, analyze field buttons. So I have it selected to hide all of my field buttons. If I unselect that, you can see I get these different options so I can filter it right on my screen. But if I don't want to see those because I'm importing as a picture, I can hide them. So those are kind of the basics of setting up a chart for importing. And when you bring it in, I'll redo this one. So I'm going to hit copy, go to home, copy, and then I go to my PowerPoint, open that up. Let's duplicate this slide. Just hit right click and duplicate. I'll delete that. And when I go to paste, I'll go to this little drop down arrow, and that's where I see a bunch of the different options. This is typically just for text. I don't use this for any kind of graphics, but this is for that embedding option. And it keeps the formatting that I had when I was editing it over in Excel. So that can be handy if you want to keep that. This will link the data and use the destination theme. It looks a little bit funky. I don't typically use that even if I'm trying to create the link. This one keeps the source formatting and links it. This one will work. I typically go to paste special, which I'll show you. And this one just pastes it right as a picture, and you can see it keeps everything the way it looked from Excel. If I go to paste special and I go to paste as a link, this is where it lets me put it in as a chart object. And then if I go to paste, it gives me those same options as before. So the one that I want is this, keep source formatting and embed, because that's how I had it before. And that'll give me the most options for animating and showing it off in the presentation. Because normally you'd be doing this probably because you're, showing, business information like profits and things like that, not just these goofy little more trivia than anything else. And from here, when you go to animate, you can choose just about anything. If I were to say, I typically like wipe because it's a bar graph, and that'll slide the bars up into the screen. I'll show what that looks like. See, it just kind of slides the whole thing up. That's one way to do it. You could do it with a shape. You could do just about anything. Some will look a little bit weirder than others. This would be a pretty strange one to do. Very distracting. But if we go back to that wipe, you can go to these effect options just like we could with other animations. And because it's embedded and it knows it's an Excel file, it gives you special options to bring in each of the different chart elements. And so you can bring it in by series, by category, by element in series, and by element in category. And these will obviously depend based on what type of chart you have. It'll also look different, say you had a scatter plot or something like that. And you can see the different options just to get a sense of what you want and how to use them. What I've done is, because these are stacked and it's all these different elements stacked on top of each other, this is going to be the best option for me. If they were laid out like I had it set up in kind of that really basic chart from the Excel file where each year was kind of clustered together, this by category might be the way I want to do it. Each year would appear on its own. So this is what I've done, and you can see a little preview of it, and it slides through, sends them all in, and it just kind of grows before your eyes as you view the slide. And so that's roughly what I have set up for this particular presentation with Excel. The other thing that I've done is back on this slide. This is just another example of something you can do. These are all imported in just as pictures. I turned off all the filter buttons, so it's just kind of a clean chart. And I've animated them all to come in one at a time on top of each other. This would be a similar way to show that same information. If I go to the animation pane, you can see that I've put in these different animations. And this took a little bit longer than that other chart, but it gives maybe a cleaner effect than trying to differentiate between all the colors. We can preview the way that looks. So I've got 1959 coming up, and then 69, and it fades from one to the other. And you can see those changes through the years over time. So that's another way to do that. So there's a lot of versatility depending on what you do, and it all depends on kind of what your goal is as far as the outcome. So this one I'm gonna delete because this one's the one that I just kind of made on the fly here. Doop. And this one was just an example, so I'll delete that one too. Boop. And now we can kind of get into talking about making these presentations as self-running automated programs, which is something that you may want if you had like a kiosk, or kind of like what you were showing me, Susan, where it was this video that was being sent to people that was playing on its own. And this is something that I've considered doing if I was doing a talk and I had some time beforehand, before the audience kind of arrived, where I wanted to just kind of have something playing on loop in order to just kind of keep people entertained before the actual presentation. So with that said, this is something that most of these slides are already put together. They're not terrible, they're not great, they're just kind of there to give the effect. So most of what it comes down to when you're making an automated presentation is setting up your timings, which we've talked a little bit about before in transitions and animations. But there's also a little bit that you can do if you want to make it interactive for the audience too. Maybe it's set up at a computer at an expo and people are able to click on the presentation. They can't escape from it themselves, but they can click different features and use it that way. And something that I find really helpful when I'm doing this is creating a storyboard about how this will go. And usually the way it looks, and I'll hold up my little note sheet here, is I typically have this setup where I decide, okay, I'm going to have a home screen, I'm going to have these different sections, and I'm going to have a final section. They'll branch to each other, and you can click to get between them, kind of like a web page almost. And the first way to kind of set this up is to set up sections in the PowerPoint. And these are helpful for organizing the slideshow later, but also for setting up links within the PowerPoint to go back and forth. So right now I kind of have this beginning slide where, these are the general categories: the early years, changing trends, and the newest additions. And I've got a title slide for pretty much each of those sections and a little bit of information under each one. And here's our changing trends, and it goes into a little bit about the sport, and then it goes into how new breeds are made, and we'd want that to be its own section as well. And there's a final slide. It's kind of like this conclusion, and we'd want that to be appearing at the end of the presentation. And so anytime we want to make a new section, we'll go in between the slides, and you can see I just clicked in here and it creates this little boundary. When I right click, I can click add section and it lets me title it. So I'll just title it the same thing as the slide, early years, and I'll hit rename. It kind of gives us this default section here, and we can rename that too if we wanted. I could call that title. And so we just go through and make the sections wherever we want them. And these will be where we link to later on. So here's our last little. And then our end slide. Because that's kind of like the contact information, I'll call that contact. Oop. So now that these are all set up, the next thing that we can do is we can hide and collapse these if we don't want to see them all. Click those little arrows and if you have a really long presentation, that might make it more manageable for working on it. But then we can make those links so we can get back and forth for our viewers. And what I've done is I've set it up so I have this slide that'll then morph into this one. I haven't put in that feature yet. We can do that, transition, morph, and so it slides over. And the other thing that'll happen when we do that is I'm going to turn these into links that become clickable. And so someone who's maybe watching this at a kiosk, it'll open up, it'll transition to this slide, and it'll pause there for a while for them, and they can select if they want to go right to a particular section. And so what you want to do when you're making a link, and this goes for linking within a presentation or to somewhere else outside the presentation, is you'll go to Insert, and this looks different depending on the version of PowerPoint. Sometimes it says just hyperlink, and that's one way to do it. This is what it looks like in 365, the subscribed version, and you can go and hit the little drop down. It doesn't have any recent items. If I'd copied something from the internet, that would show up here, but I can go to this insert link, and you can see it has all these different choices. I could link it to a different document on my computer, I could link it to my email, I could link it to something on the web, or just something in this document. This is kind of interesting. I could send it just about anywhere on my computer. But so this first one, we're going to send it to that slide so that whenever someone clicks on that, this is where they'll go. So if I hit OK, it turns it into a little hyperlink. If I hold down Control and click it, it sends me there. And so then I could do that for each of these. Go to Insert, Link, and then go to bloop, hit there. You can see it's purple now because because I'd clicked on it, but that's all right. And then we could go, bloop. And now these will all take us to the different spots throughout the slideshow. So I could click there and immediately go to the end. And these work while I'm playing the show too. So if I were in here, opened it up, it'll transition, and then I could click on changing trends and it brings me here right to the middle of my show. And we'll set it up across the bottom so that these options become kind of available again. I don't know if the sound plays when you hear it, but I'd set that up before. And so this linking tool makes it really functional for folks who are viewing it. And what I've got going on this slide is I have a few little icons across the bottom that'll do effectively the same thing. And this home button, the idea of that is it'll take us back to the first slide. And you could do that as a link as well, but it's sometimes more fun to do it as an action. And this is still under Insert, under Links, Action. And then this becomes a little bit more like when you click on something on a website, for instance. So originally it sets it up to be a hyperlink. And this isn't necessarily what I want. I can go to Slide, and then it lets me select which slide I go to. I could go to that first one or the second one, doesn't really matter. I like the transition of it sliding over, but perhaps it would be more functional for folks to go right here so they can click on it at any point, or I would just make the timing a little bit faster. Either way, I could hit OK, and then you have these options of sounds and highlighting when it's clicked. So that way folks know when they're selecting it. It kind of gives them that cue. So you can check it or uncheck it, and there's all kinds of different options. There's a whoosh. The laser's a little bit scary. So I just like the simple click. And then highlight on click lets you know that you've selected it. So I like having those on. You can also set it up so that when you hover your mouse over it, it does things too. This might be more useful to let people know that it is a link that they can click on. I don't have it set up on here, but that's a reason why you might choose to use this. So I'll hit OK. And now if I were to go to the slideshow from here, I could click on that and it brings me back to the home. And then this shows up and I can say, okay, I did want to be there and I haven't set up these links, and it would just run through the presentation on me. So then I would set these up to do exactly the same thing. I'd go to action, I'd go to hyperlink to, instead of next slide, pick a custom slide, click that last one, thank you for watching, hit OK, play sound, we'll make that little click, we'll highlight when it clicks. And this one will just be like a scroll forward. I have these transitions set up really fast just for the purposes of the demonstration. But if this was something I actually was having, running, I'd want it to go pretty slow so people have a chance to read it. And then they could click this to keep moving on as soon as they're done. And so I'd click next slide. That is what I want. Play sound. Let's make a little click and highlight. So once that's set up, the reason how I got these icons, just so you know, is from insert and icons. They have all kinds, and I just typed in roughly what I was looking for. I could make it a little doggy too, if I wanted to. And you can change the colors if you want. There's a fun feature when you're working on these graphics fills. You can just select any kind of standard color. Or if you're like, I really want the color of, this isn't a very exciting slide, but if these dogs were, say, particular colors, I could select a color off the dog and make it this little guy. Just a fun trick. And maybe I'll put in a doggy later. But if I want these options to be available for each slide, I don't have to set that up each time. I can just highlight these so they're all selected. Note that if you try to click one and then control and click the other, control click is what activates the link, so that won't quite work. You gotta just highlight them all. And then I copy, and then I'll paste them all in. And I'll do that for each slide so that anywhere you are in the presentation, you can access those same tools. Boop. Except perhaps the contact slide, which that wouldn't necessarily make sense for.
Except the home button, maybe.
Yeah, so we'll just take that one. I'll copy that, paste it here, and we'll arrange it to be centered. Doop. And granted, if this was something you wanted to be looping, you would set it up so that even though they could click this to go home, it would probably take them back given enough time anyway too. So kind of the next thing to do with these is to set up their transitions, because we have that branching function now going. And I'll make this a little bit slower just so that we can kind of utilize that and it won't just jump through super quick. So if we go to those transitions, we probably want this to be something not too exciting in general. You want some emphasis, but only for specific things. So I'll click fade, and that'll fade it in, and I'll apply that to all. And the next thing I'm going to do is just change the timing. I have it set to, normally the default is on click, so I'll get rid of that. And since I want to run it on its own, I'll have it go and change after maybe 5 seconds. And we'll keep that, we'll apply that to all too, and then we can just change the exceptions. So the exceptions are probably this one that I want to change immediately. We'll make that 0. And we want this to be a morph instead of a fade. So that's one way to do it. We could also do it as that wipe tool too, and it would slide it across. Either way would work. I'm curious why it's doing a fade out and fade in, but that's all right. Anyway, going through this now, you can set up different things to add emphasis to. We've talked about in other movies using music as well. So when you set this up to be automated, you can go to that playback option after you've imported it, which you just do from insert and audio. This is something that I'd saved, just stock audio that I put on the desktop. go to playback, and typically it comes in with no style. And you can click play in background, and that sets most of the features up for you. So it sets it up to start automatically, play across all the slides, stop until it's loop until it's stopped, and then it hides this icon during the show. And that usually works pretty well. Rewind after playing might be more useful if you had something where there was specific music for each slide. So you wouldn't want it to try to play across all of them. You'd want it to go back to the beginning every time that slide was selected. So that's another thing that you could do. Otherwise, so for instance, say I paused the show, it would keep playing that music from where I left off instead of rewinding it if I went back to the first slide. But I think if you're moving around and navigating through a presentation, it makes sense for it to just keep going instead of being kind of chopped up. And so going down, the only other kind of major transitions that I have going on are the animations for these different, these graphical elements that we've put in through Excel. And although that is wonderful, something that I think might be fun is to put in a little bit of animation at the beginning of each section, kind of giving the viewer a cue that we're at the beginning of a section. So I'm going to move this slide up to the top. And this is another fun feature for these automated presentations, putting in videos. So what I've done here is I've inserted a little video, another one that was just saved to my computer. And from format, I've cropped it and resized it to fit roughly the shape I want. I wish it was a little bit wider, but alas, it was one of those kind of long phone camera videos. So we just kind of cropped the bottom and the top and put it in here. And then the playback, what I have set up is that it will start automatically so that I don't have to click to make it start playing. And the other thing I want to do, say this is a pretty short clip and the slide's going to be running for a little while, I want to loop it until the slide stops. And I want to rewind it every time it plays. And we don't want to hide it, we don't want to make it full screen, but maybe we do, this doesn't actually have any volume to it, but we could turn that volume to low if we wanted. Maybe we put in a babbling brook for something. That would be a reason to make it quieter. So we'll take a look at the way this slide will play when it gets to it. Here we go, we've got our little Sheltie running across the screen. Meow. And so if we wanted to do some sort of animation to indicate that it's the beginning of a new section, this might be a fun time to use that little doggy icon. So what I'd do is I'd go in, type in dog, and we'll bring him in whenever, oh, he's black, so we probably want to change that color right away. Let's see, let's grab this orange. We'll make it match the orange on the slide already. Perhaps we'll animate it to do something fun when he comes in. Maybe he'll bounce. That's pretty fun. So let's do that on each of the different slides. And it kind of gives that sense of, all right, this is our new section. So I'm going to copy him with his animation and bring him to our other sections too. We'll go here, we'll hit paste. He looks a little funky there, so we'll slide him over right into here. We'll copy him again. And maybe this is a little bit overkill, but sometimes it's fun just to have that, little bit of consistency. And see, he matches down here the little markings, and it's just another way to add design features to your slides and make them play the way you want. In this one, if I had a lot of time, maybe I'd make each of these pictures kind of fade in one after the other, so you kind of see this progression, so they're not all just appearing at once. Let's just check. Yeah, his animation stayed. So we could do that. What I'll do is I'll hit fade, and I'll go to that animation pane. This actually would be pretty quick. What I'll do is instead of making it on click, I'll make it after previous, and then clicking on this, oh, let's see, will it let me do it? I'll click add animation. Oh, it won't, it's not letting me use the animation painter. I was hoping to cheat and not have to do this for each one. But we'll click fade, make it after previous. I'm kind of surprised that it won't let me do that, but that's okay. Oh, here we go. Now it's letting me do it. I had to select the image first, not the animation. So if I click it and then I double click it, now it's going to be locked. So I can click through and it's stacking these for me because I set it up to be after on each one. And so here we go. Now they're all going to come in one after the other. Boom. So that's another way to add some more excitement and interest to some of these sorts of slides. And then when you have everything all set the way you want it, the next thing to do is to set it up as this automated slideshow. And you'll do that under the slideshow tab. And this may live in a slightly different spot depending on the version, but usually there's some option that has set up slideshow. And from here, you click on that and you get all kinds of different options that you can do. And in this case, I'm going to show all the slides. I do want to present it, but if I was, leaving this unattended, I'd put it as the kiosk mode, and I'd loop it continuously until, someone hits escape. Maybe I can even click that too, but it sets that as a locked thing when I do it. So we'll loop continuously. You could change it so that you don't have any narrations or animations. Maybe you're repurposing this presentation, so you can change that if you want. And then the other thing to also make sure it has is that it advances the slides on those timings that are set up. So what we can do is hit OK, and we'll go to our first slide and watch that from the beginning. Now, the music probably won't play over Zoom, but you might hear it through my headphones being picked up by the microphone. So it starts going, and then these are all clickable. And then it slides through. Once again, we could click on here. Oh, our little doggy bounced in. Maybe we're done reading. You can click ahead. And maybe say we'd seen this slide and we didn't want to watch it all the way through. We could click this here and then move right on to the next one. We can watch it go through if we want. It's almost done. Oop. And I forgot to put my buttons in on this slide. So it's always good to run through it and see what's going on. There's our little doggy, bounces in. Click ahead. And now it'll just loop back to the beginning.
Now, you said the purpose of the doggy bouncing in was to indicate you're on a new section.
Yeah, and honestly, watching it happen, the timing isn't great. So that's probably something I'd pull out.
Do faster, or can you do it?
Maybe do it faster, or I'm not sure. Let me click outside
Or
here.
do it at the end of the one previous instead?
Yeah, that's another option too. Oh, here's part of it. It's set up to go on click, and so it actually waits for the slide to be done. So if I click with previous, it'll do it now. when that slide comes in. Bloop, there he bounces in. And maybe I would want
Oh,
him to be in, say, the other corner. I could format him so he's flipped the other way. Maybe that would make more sense. And so there's a lot of trial and error with these things. And I'd have to go at this point to the animation. He's going to bounce in, but he's going to bounce from the wrong direction. And it doesn't give me an option for that to change it. So maybe that's not the way to do it, because he'll bounce and he'll bounce backwards, which is just a little
well,
funky to
maybe
look at.
just he would look good on this left, on the far left, but if you just made him black instead of gold on just that one
Yeah,
slide.
yeah, and that's absolutely an option too. We could go back, put him around, okay, set with previous. Maybe in this one he's a black lab instead of a yellow lab.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to put, the reason why you moved them over is because on this one, being in the left-hand corner, the gold didn't look right. But
Yep,
on this slide, he could be black
he could be
instead.
black. Yeah. So there's all different sorts of ways to do it. You can play it here and see what happens. It's still a little slow. So I think I'd want to pull him over a little and just play with those timings on that animation. And so it says the duration, oh, it says the duration's 2 seconds. Maybe I want that to be just 1 second. Let's preview. Bloop. Well, it just makes them bounce faster. So, you know, there's a little bit of, yeah, just
Or
trial
maybe
and
he can
error.
wag his tail, maybe swivel his wag his tail.
That would be pretty great. Yeah, oh. I kind of like that actually. It's like he's chasing his tail. So we could do that with him. Make him chase his own little tail.
Yeah, that looks good.
I like that too. And this one, he also might be a bit of a funny color. So what if we made him on this one? I like the idea of him being different versions of labs. And so I'm just gonna make him a chocolate lab here.
There you go. Or a white lab, they're beautiful too.
That's true. We
The
could do that
chocolate
as
looks
well.
good.
Yeah. So we'll make sure his animation's right. He's gonna swivel. There we go. So we open the slide, it fades in, and he swivels around. So that's one way that you could do it too. But yeah, a lot of this is just kind of to try to provide some ideas about what you can do in PowerPoint and maybe hopefully kind of give you ideas about how to use it in your own presentations. Are there any questions that you had that we could talk about before the end?
No, it's a lot of information.
Yeah, it's true.
But real interesting. I mean, things I didn't know you could do, and it really, opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, and going back a little to the Excel stuff too, I'll switch back to that screen. Excel is definitely a really powerful tool, and being able to incorporate it into PowerPoint is really useful. A lot of folks that I know who do end up presenting a lot in PowerPoint use other software, whether it be MATLAB or R or C++, all these different programming softwares that just whoosh way over my head. They're really helpful for that analysis, but if you can then move that data into Excel to make your charts, it lets you do some pretty functional things with them in PowerPoint. And just kind of going over just a few of those that are pretty straightforward, especially if you've made all of your tables in Excel to begin with. I'll move this out of the way and zoom in a little over on this side. Whoop. That might be a little bit too big. But so over here is just kind of a general table that I've set up to show what's going on with the number of breed registries in America over several years. And if I scroll over, it won't let me. It's okay. I'm hoping to get into this. There we go. All right. So what I was trying to show is You can even do different things with your charts too and bring your charts into PowerPoint as well. And something that's really handy when you have a table like this where there's trends that don't necessarily chart well together, because that's kind of a complicated looking piece with all these different sections for years, and maybe there's even more years that I wanted to include. What I could do instead is add something called a sparkline. So if I click in here, in anywhere inside my data, and click Insert, there's this option of sparkline. And if I go to the line option, it asks me for my data range, and it just has one section selected. So I'll grab all of this, and it asks me where I want the location. And this is just where it's going to put the mini chart. And I'll tell it to put it right next to those data. I'll hit OK. And now you can see these little trend lines that it makes that go across and represent, the way the trends go. So for instance, with, oh, you know why this doesn't quite make sense? I have it going from 59 to 2000.
Right,
It's like,
I
this
was just
doesn't look
seeing
right.
that too.
It's like this,
So
this
you're
looks,
reading right to left.
yeah. So this would be something where um, I could either inverse my data, so I could select
Looks
this.
like boxers are more pop. Oh, bulldogs.
Yeah, yeah, isn't that funny? And it's funny because so we have our Shih Tzus that they weren't introduced until 1969, and so it looks funny that they're declining to nothing in this example. Um,
We're looking at getting a pug. I see Yorkshire Terriers are popular.
they are, and granted, this goes back to the last um, one of the last years that I was showing in 2009.
Oh, what is that? Oh nine. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we can make that a little clearer. Open these up a little bit. There we go. Yeah, so the data doesn't go to present day. I have no idea what it is now, but there's a way to go about, if I were to copy this, and I think if I were to paste it and go to paste special, I think there's a way for me to transpose it. And I think that is what I would want. Oh, it's going to flip it the wrong way. Transpose flips it. There used to be a handy way. The other way I could do this would be to sort and filter. But anyway, once again, this is why I really like pivot tables, because I can just change them really easily. I find them much, much simpler to maneuver with. And I could put a sparkline in here too. Select my data, go to Insert, Sparkline, put them in here. Bloop. And there we go. Now it's going in the right direction. So that's another way to do it. And I don't know,
Yeah, I
have
like
you?
that spark line. That's fun. That's
Yeah.
great.
And you can put in an axis too. I can just do a general one. I'll click Show Axis. And I don't know why it picked it only for that one. Let's put in Design, Axis. Interesting. Usually that works. Not sure why it chose only to put one in on that one. Fascinating. Excel always is kind of this black box for me, and so I have no idea why it did that. The only thing I can guess is because that's the only value that has, a zero number, and it tries to take up as little space as
Oh,
possible when it makes these spark lines. So that's my guess. But there's other ways to do it too. Spark lines, you can really easily switch them around. We could go from this line to these columns, and now we'll turn off that axis because it doesn't quite look right. But they're all set up on the same bottom, and you can see roughly the trend as it went. Now, granted, it doesn't scale them to each other, and so it makes it look like, over here we have, what is this? This is 1989 Yorkshire Terriers. Looks like almost as many, if not more than are 1969 beagles, which is definitely not the case. There's over 20,000 dogs difference there. So, you know, so it does have some limitations, but it's pretty fun. If you were working on something where, it was wins and losses, you could do that too. And something I've seen when working with data that's like profits or like net win or loss is doing something like this, and you can make
Job
the
loss. They
yeah
do this a lot for job
okay
losses,
yeah you can make
like during
those
the pandemic.
negatives. Oh, I can only imagine how almost discouraging that must be to have to go
Well, it
through that
looks
kind of
just like
data.
that one. It does.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's something else that you could do, and being able to move that into PowerPoint is pretty handy. Oh, oops. I always get confused in Zoom when I have to change the screen I share. So that's kind of what I had for today. Do you have any questions? Would it be helpful if I posted these files with the video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind is whenever you do have Excel with PowerPoint and they're kind of linked together, either as an embedded file, well, not so much as an embedded file, but absolutely if it's linked, they do have to go together. And it has to be
Okay.
able to find it every time that you go to select it.
Now, where do you post these again? I didn't pick up the last one.
Oh, no worries. They're right on the website for Bozeman
Okay.
Public Library. What
Okay.
I can
Gotcha.
do,
All right.
here, I'll show you where they are if you want.
The e-learning link or
Yep,
whatever.
yep. Here, we'll go up here. We'll open a new tab for, oops, it brought me right to the book club page, but that's okay. I can go right to the regular library page. And we'd go to, pretty sure it's under Services, Technology and Research. And under here we have computer classes, and that's where those live.
Oh, that's where the computer classes are. Okay.
Yep.
I did post the Word ones on our Facebook page. They're coming up in April.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I hope those are exciting for people. And so yeah, if you ever want to go back and watch one of these, they all live here. And at the bottom, we have our Excel ones that we recorded from last month too.
Well, that
And
is great to
yeah,
know
yeah,
for
so you can
sure.
always direct people here. It's bozemanlibrary.org, services, adults, tech, computer classes.
A little
So,
bit varied.
so you know what we can do? I'm copying this. I'm going to hit Control C. I'm going to go to that PowerPoint and we're going to put it at the end. Because what better way to end this than to put in that link? So we'll insert a text box, or what we can do is we'll do it as an icon. We'll put in a computer. Here's the website, little icon. Bloop. And then what we can do is we'll go to insert, link, and see how it pulls it up right here? This is the web address. And so now
Yeah.
from anywhere anytime you look at this PowerPoint and open it up, you can click it and go right to the website. Granted, it won't let
Awesome.
me do that because I'm in Zoom, but if I went back to my screen share, it would bring us right here. Boop, here we go. So that's kind of an introduction to creating a self-running presentation and then linking it to Excel.